Welcome to Coming About with David Paragamian, the podcast that dives deep into the minds of leaders who have transformed their businesses and industries, paving the way for a better future. Here's Dave.
Welcome back to my conversation with Kathleen Herowanto, who has an impressive background in media, marketing, and communications. After starting her career hoping to work in the music industry, Kathleen made a pivot and successfully landed on the agency side of advertising and marketing. She later took that expertise in-house, leading omni-channel media for one of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies in the world. Kathleen, then you made the logical move into the CFO's office, taking on an advisory role focused on finance and operations. Can you tell us more about that pivot?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not a logical step anywhere. However, one of the great things about the organization I'm with is the opportunities that are given. So even as I look at my career, look at it as the path forward. And I mean, to be honest, I can't even tell you what's next after this yet. But instead of thinking of it as a straight ladder, thinking of it as a jungle gym, it's okay to go left and right before going up more, and making yourself more well-rounded, or I should say making myself more well-rounded. It started with the same thought as my transition from agency to in-house did. Coming in-house, I was able to learn a lot more about the different pieces of the business. However, the piece of the business that I had the full picture of still continued to be marketing. So beyond media, into marketing, inside out, know it well, understand the other pieces of the business, but not necessarily as in-depth as I would desire to. So as I look at my individual development plan, what do I want to do? It was a bit all over the place. I wouldn't even say this was a target role for me. As I have thought about my relationships with mentors over the years, I think one of the things that I've taken, which I really try to ground myself in, is what does fulfillment look like for me? So fulfillment for me is both a blend of personal and professional. Professionally, that means I get to leverage my skills to add value to the organization. And very importantly, I continue to challenge myself and continue to grow as a professional. I don't do well with being stagnant. Anyone who knows me knows, I don't even physically sit still for a long time. So when it comes to continuing to educate myself and challenge myself and push myself forward, I really thrive on that. And then on the personal side, right, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a mom. I have 2 young children. Being present for my family and being a part of these moments that go by so fast is a big piece of fulfillment for me as well. So it started with understanding, right, spending time to understand what fulfillment means for me and keeping that at the core of what I consider. Then saying, what am I most interested in? Right, what are my talents and skills? What are my passions? And what is my opportunity? And seeing where those intersect. All of that said, at the end of the day, it was a bit serendipitous. I got a text message that said, hey, would you be willing to try this on an interim basis? After panicking a little, I decided to take the leap, and interim became full-time, and I have enjoyed every moment of it, no matter how crazy it could be at times. And I've learned more in the last 18 months than I have at any other point of my professional career. I'm just a sponge right now, which I love.
You have just said so many smart things. If I had a transcript in front of me, I want to get out my yellow highlighter, Professor, and hit a couple of those. One of them was the idea that the career path is not the old school stair step up, but in your case, it was a great growth opportunity is moving laterally, which again, I totally agree with. I think that idea that career paths are only north and south, up the stairs, I think that's an old school, antiquated idea. And I think, as you said, the term you used was being well-rounded. Couldn't agree more. I also, something that I'd love to talk some more with you about is that whole idea of knowing your own internal north point. You talked about your passion and your purpose and knowing you want to learn, you want to grow, but at the same time, you also want to be present, for your 2 young children. And so I love that. And I think for me, that's about making sure that you're at the kind of an organization that allows you to do that, that knows and respects that you can do a great job and really care about your job, be passionate about your job, be successful at your job. But you may need to be at a Little League field at 4:00 someday to see a game, and that's okay.
Exactly.
Well, it sounds like you're very fortunate, not only that you picked a wonderful company that's in the process of growing, but a company that understands and supports not only you, but others in knowing that we're all human beings and we all have this family life on our backs that is important to us, that we have to do. So good on you. I'm thrilled that you shared that story. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you. And I think it's also being bold enough to vocalize that. I've talked to many people along the way who feel the same, but fear communicating it. There shouldn't be a fear in communicating what's important to you, right? Any job, the way that I see it is any role should work not only for the hiring manager, but also for the person who's taking it. You should feel empowered enough and be bold enough to lay out your expectations because it needs to work for both sides. So that is something I did. Was it uncomfortable? Absolutely. But it was well worth it.
You just said, was it uncomfortable? Yes, but it was worth it. And I think when I think back on the good things that have happened to me personally and professionally, it's always when I was able to take a calculated risk. I'm not advocating for jumping out of an airplane at 30,000 feet without a parachute, but that calculated risk of saying to a prospective employer, hey, I'd love to do this job. Here's the family commitments that I have that we need to find a way to balance together. Let's talk about that, right? It's those kinds of conversations that are a little awkward, a little hard, but it makes for success in the end.
And that goes back to the fulfillment piece, right? If you know what your North Star is, you need to be a bit of your own advocate to ensure that you get the fulfillment you need. Because again, I love my position right now. I'm soaking it all in. There are so many new things I've had exposure to, experience on. I've become more well-rounded, as I said earlier, is one of my desires. Looking at leadership and driving culture and you name it. I've had the opportunity to touch a little bit of everything over the last 18 to 24 months. But part of what makes that work for me is that I was bold to have that conversation early on and make sure that that would work for both of us as this moved forward.
I couldn't agree more. So well said. That calculated, confident step forward that you're right. You're calling it bold, but it's about doing the right thing and making sure that you're taking care of yourself, your family, your career aspirations. Kathleen, I've loved this part of the conversation. I want to pivot to one last topic. Given the breadth of everything that you've seen and done across some world-class publicly held agencies and again at a world-class pharmaceutical company, I want to talk just generally about some of the advertising and media trends. Are there any things that you, looking into the landscape for media and advertising going forward into 2024, not about your company, not about your brands, but just in general about the media landscape, any observations or predictions?
I'm sure you hear it everywhere these days, right? I see it everywhere, but it continues to be more about personalization and meeting the consumer where they are. I mean, we are being bombarded all the time, right? From a consumer perspective, we're being bombarded all the time. It's what is authentic, what is natural. I think a lot of the old, I don't want to say antiquated, but sort of well-known standard ways of getting your message out there does not resonate at the same scale that it used to. So really, the authenticity, being a part of the conversation versus surrounding the conversation is where I expect it to continue to trend.
That's consistent with the thing that was rumbling in my head when you were speaking was about the word retailization, that we continue to empower the patient in this case. to really be part of the conversation about his or her healthcare and the choices that they're making. And then you added something that I think is really insightful, which is about the authenticity of the content so that it rings true. Saturday Night Live has gotten away for years of spoofing and making fun of pharma advertising because it was so predictable. People sitting in a bathtub, people running through a field holding hands, with 30 seconds of horrific voiceover language about side effects, right? And so I think getting away from the tried and true formula and having an authentic conversation, as you say, meeting these folks where they are there any media channels that 5 years ago were, you think, under leveraged that are getting their due now?
I mean, 5 years ago, social was almost impossible for pharma. The evolution has been pretty significant there. I think you'll still continue to see more. I mean, that is definitely the one that jumps out. Right? As you think of, to me and my former team, majority of us were not pharma people. And it's like, okay, great, we're going to leverage this channel, and then realize how many barriers you hit with regulations and things of that nature. It's crazy. That's where the conversation is happening. That's where the patients or the consumers are finding a way, right? I think the industry as a whole has worked well in finding a way to be able to start to be a part of that conversation within a compliant way.
Yeah, that really resonates. The social was taboo, right, 5 years ago, or it was something that everyone was interested in talking about at conferences, but very judiciously tiptoeing around when they got back to the office. And now I think it's an important part of the conversation. This is where patients are getting their knowledge about products and the disease state and mechanisms. So as an industry, we need to be aware of that and we need to deal with that, obviously within the bounds of all of the FDA regulations, our own corporate restrictions and guidelines and good practices, but we can't ignore where the patients are having these conversations.
And I think the other part of that is, right, not just social, but any medium that allows for conversation broader than the molecule. We at Novo are very careful to say, this is patients with diabetes, as an example, not a diabetes patient, because that's just a very small part of who this overall individual is when you're talking about a patient of any disease state. So really, how beyond what the medicine can do for the individual, what is the support service and how to help them understand how to navigate if that's what they want to look for, and giving them the opportunities to find that type of content, right, in different forms, right? You see it in social, you see the opportunity in office, you see it in pharmacy. So I think that is another area where there's been a lot of an evolution, in my opinion, around more focused on, right, of course, the molecule, but also the support for the disease state and for the whole person.
No, it really resonates. And you mentioned all of those places of care that are not just the doctor's office, but at the pharmacy counter, at home, with their caregiver, how it integrates into their diet and their exercise and their lifestyle, right? It isn't just a patient and a pill. It's much more than that. Kathleen, one last question I can't help. Since you started us there, I'm going to end us there, which is, if you could now go back and, with the benefit of hindsight, speak to that young lady who was graduated from college and was so fixated on a career in the music industry, what's the one piece of advice you would tell her as she was embarking on this journey that is obviously, we're only mid-course and boy, it's working out great and you've done so many wonderful things, but I'm wondering, what advice would you give yourself if you could go back?
I mean, I have a phrase that's popping into my mind, which I try to stay grounded in even now: to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. If you don't, to your calculated risk point, if you can't address change, if you're unwilling to take a calculated risk or a leap, push yourself outside your comfort zone, go a bit outside of the box, you're limiting yourself. I've seen that throughout my career, but I will say even more so in the last 2 years. I mean, 18 years in media, and now I'm a chief of staff to the CFO. That was really pushing outside my comfort zone. If I didn't take that risk, I wouldn't have had this opportunity. I wouldn't have had this learning experience. I wouldn't have had the clarity that I now have of where else this can take me.
I love that. I'll put a punctuation mark on it before we end, which is, I think that idea of personal reinvention, just allowing yourself to continue to learn and grow and take smart, calculated, thoughtful steps, risks, if you will, to use the word, but those pivots, because the road around us is littered with the people that wouldn't take a risk, wouldn't take a pivot. We all remember a company called Kodak. We all remember a company called BlackBerry. And they sat in their boardrooms and said, no, we're great just the way we are. Well, not so much. And so I love that idea that we're constantly allowing ourselves, our companies, our lives to pivot, to change, to grow. Kathleen, thanks so much for being a guest and sharing all your wisdom today with the listener. I really appreciate it. And I wish you, on your journey that is both up and sideways on your career journey, I wish you much continued success.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And that wraps up another episode of Coming About. If you like the show, please take a moment to subscribe so you'll get notified with new episodes. Also, if you have a moment, I'd love it if you left us a review so that other individuals like yourself can learn more about the show. See you next time on Coming About.
This has been Coming About. We hope these conversations have left you feeling empowered and ready to take your organization to the next level. To speak with Dave about your business transformation or to learn more about Health Monitor Network, go to healthmonitornetwork.com. And don't forget to check out his book, Coming About: How We Transformed a Major Media Company and the Lessons There for You. Available wherever books are sold. Coming About with David Paragamian is a production of Advantage Audio.